Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the deep shadows of late antiquity, into a world where empires are ghosts, kings rule from ruins, and every step you take echoes across centuries that are about to end. You stand just outside the walls of Constantinople on a cold March evening in the year 535 CE, the sea wind carrying the smell of salt, burning oil, and the anxious thrum of armies preparing to march. Soldiers gather around you, Byzantine infantry tightening belts, cavalry checking saddles, officers whispering orders under their breath. Torches flicker against helmets, casting restless light on faces that know they're about to be written into the last great war of the ancient world. And somewhere deep in your chest, you feel it too, the sense that you are walking straight toward a story where Italy itself, old, majestic, exhausted Italy, may not survive. You rub the chill from your hands, feeling that slight teasing voice in your mind saying, "You probably won't survive this." But don't worry, settle in, stay close. This is the fall of Ravenna, and you're safe here with me. If you're watching this because you love the darker corners of history, Rome's twilight, forgotten wars, lost cities, then hit like so more people can join us. And if you want more journeys into broken empires, subscribe so you never miss a night. Right now, type in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Let's see where in the world this ancient fall is being heard tonight. All right, breathe in that icy Constantinople air. Let's begin. Your boots crunch on the frozen earth as you follow the vast column of Justinian soldiers departing the capital. The emperor's dream is simple to say and impossible to achieve. Restore the Roman world. Not the shrunken slice of empire that still clings to the eastern Mediterranean. No, he wants the old Rome, the Rome of Caesar, the Rome of Augustus, the Rome whose heartbeat once pulsed across continents. Italy, the heart of the West, has been lost for nearly 60 years. The Ostrogoths, Germanic warriors who rode in after the collapse, rule from Ravenna, a city coiled in marsh and sea like some ancient creature refusing to die, and Justinian wants it back. But you, trudging along with Belisarius's men, understand the truth better than those marble walls back in the palace. This war isn't heroic, it's bleak. Italy is a graveyard long before you set foot on it. Snowflakes drift through the air as the army boards transport ships. Soldiers grip the rails, staring into fog rolling off the Bosporus. One of them mutters beside you, "We're not marching to glory, we're marching to ghosts." He's right, and yet, here you are. The fleet pushes westward across a restless grey sea. Storms hammer the decks, wind tears at the sails. You cling to a rope as a wave crashes over you, cold enough to make your bones complain. A sailor shouts, laughing grimly, "If Italy doesn't kill us, the sea will." A comforting thought, depending on your taste. When Sicily finally rises on the horizon, dark mountains piercing the clouds, you feel something shift. Belisarius, tall and calm as ever, surveys the coast with the stillness of a man who already sees the path ahead, even through chaos. The locals greet him not with spears, but with open gates. They've had enough of Gothic taxes, Gothic soldiers, Gothic kings. Honestly, can you blame them? Within weeks the island is his. No great battles, no epic stands, just a tired people welcoming a new master because the old one forgot how to care for them. And as you cross the Strait of Messina into Italy proper, the truth becomes clearer. The peninsula is half empty, fields untended, towns silent, roads cracked. The land feels hollowed out, like a giant that hasn't eaten in years. Belisarius moves north with a quiet, predatory grace. Naples resists, fiercely, bravely, until hunger makes bravery stupid. When the walls finally fall, you step through a city torn between hope and fear. The citizens beg protection from the Goths, but also from you. War is confusing like that. By the time you reach Rome, something strange happens. The Eternal City opens its gates. The Senate greets Belisarius. The people cheer. The Gothic garrison backs away nervously, like wolves who've suddenly noticed lions in the yard. They withdraw north, toward their king Witiges, who is gathering strength in Ravenna, and this is where the war truly begins. Because as you stand beneath Rome's weathered arches, Listening to the distant thunder of Gothic war horns approaching from the north, you understand the full weight of Justinian's plan. You aren't just fighting a kingdom, you're fighting the remains of an old world still trying to breathe. The Gothic War begins with a promise: retake Italy, restore Rome, rebuild the world. But deep down, even now, you feel something else stirring. A darker truth forming like a storm cloud on the horizon. Italy will not be restored by this war. It will be broken by it, and Ravenna, cold, marsh-wrapped Ravenna, will be the place where Italy's last ancient glory finally slips beneath the water. You wake before sunrise to the low rumble of hooves and whispered commands echoing across the Roman Forum. The sky is still dark, washed in a deep blue that makes the ruins around you look like the ribs of a long-dead creature. Soldiers move like shadows between broken columns and half-buried stones. Rome, once the centre of the world, is now a battered shell trying to remember the sound of its own heartbeat. Belisarius rides past you, cloak snapping in the wind, horse steaming in the cold. His eyes, sharp, steady, unreadable, scan the northern horizon where the Gothic armies gather. He isn't afraid. He never is. You almost envy him. A soldier beside you mutters, "If he asked us to march into Hades, we'd follow." You nod, brushing frost from your braces. It's true. Belisarius inspires that kind of loyalty. The kind that makes men forget the danger, the hunger, the endless miles of mud and death. He has that quiet fire Rome hasn't seen since the days of its greatest generals. And you're going to need every spark of that fire for what comes next. Because today, the march truly begins. The long, grueling push north that will bring the Byzantines face to face with the heart of the Ostrogothic kingdom. Ravenna, the marsh-locked fortress city standing between Justinian and the dream of a reunited empire. The sun finally rises as the army snakes along the old Via Flaminia. Shields clinking, boots thudding in steady rhythm, Rome shrinks behind you, its towers dimming, its scars blending into the sunlight. Ahead lies a landscape ravaged by decades of war. Fields are abandoned, villas stand roofless, vines strangling their columns. Farmers watch you pass with hollow eyes, unsure whether you bring salvation or simply a new kind of trouble. A child waves at you from behind a stone wall. Her mother pulls her back gently, shaking her head. The gesture is small but heavy. It tells you exactly how much hope Italy has left. Belisarius keeps the army tight. Disciplined scouts ride ahead constantly, checking roads, villages, forests. Everyone knows the Goths could strike at any moment, and they do. At a narrow valley north of Narni, Gothic riders appear on the ridges like black silhouettes carved from rock. Their cloaks flutter in the wind, their long spears gleaming. They shout insults in rough Latin, daring the Byzantines to advance. "Archers!" an officer bellows. Bows rise. Arrows fly. The Goths withdraw just as quickly as they arrived. Not defeated, just watching, testing. A reminder, you're in their land now. By nightfall, the army camps near a cluster of ruined farmhouses. Fires crackle weakly in the icy air. Soldiers huddle close, warming numb fingers. As you chew on a hard biscuit that tastes exactly like a punishment, you overhear officers whispering, "Witiges has withdrawn to Ravenna." He's abandoning central Italy? No, he's consolidating. He wants to make Ravenna the final hold. Belisarius will still come for him, and that's what the Goths fear. You shift closer to the fire. The name Ravenna carries a weight you feel even if you haven't seen it yet. A city protected by swamps, canals, and the Adriatic Sea. A city where emperors once lived, where mosaics shimmered like captured stars, a city that might be the hardest fortress in Europe to break, a city that will not fall easily. At dawn, the march resumes. Days blur into each other. Cold mornings, cautious afternoons, tense nights. Belisarius takes town after town with strategic precision. His men respect him. The locals admire him. Even enemy scouts seem wary of him. In Spoleto, you watch him negotiate with Gothic leaders who surrender rather than face his siege engines. He promises protection to civilians and delivers it. That's the thing about Belisarius. He fights brutally, but governs gently. A balance few commanders ever achieve. One evening, As you refill your water skin at a quiet stream, you hear two officers arguing softly. Belisarius is moving too fast. He must, if Witiges reaches Ravenna with all his forces. You think Ravenna can't hold? I think Ravenna can hold for years. Years! The word chills you more than the icy water dripping from your fingers. You march through Perugia, Fano, Ancona, towns that either welcome the Byzantines or offer token resistance. Each city surrendered is one less stronghold for the Goths. Each victory tightens the noose around Ravenna. But victory tastes strange here. Italy feels drained, like a candle burning at both ends. Every town you pass is thinner, poorer, emptier than the last war has eaten this land alive long before the Byzantines arrived. One night near Rimini, you sit beside a soldier cleaning his spear. He looks up, restless. "Tell me," he asks, "when Justinian dreams of restoring Rome, does he see this? Burned farms, dead orchards, empty towns. Is this the glory he wants?" You don't answer, because you don't know, because maybe no one does. The next morning, Belisarius gathers the officers. His voice is steady, calm, but his words ripple through the ranks like cold wind. We push north again. Ravenna is retreating into itself. Witiges thinks he can outlast us in his marsh fortress. We will show him he cannot. A few soldiers cheer weakly, most simply nod. Some swallow hard, because the closer you get, the more real Ravenna becomes, not just as a city, but as a final stand. The road narrows. Marshlands spread on either side, thick reeds whispering in the wind. Fog rises each morning, curling around the feet of soldiers like pale ghosts. You feel it in your bones. You're entering Ravenna's world now, a world of water, a world of silence, a world of last defiance. Belisarius rides at the head of the column, eyes fixed on the horizon, and somewhere ahead, unseen but inevitable. Ravenna waits, its mosaics glittering, its marshes guarding, its fate trembling, and with every step you realise, the end of Italy's glory is not far away. You march into the Umbrian hills under a sky the colour of tarnished silver, the air sharp with the cold that clings to Italy long after winter pretends to be over. Below you, valleys roll out like dark green waves, dotted with broken villas and abandoned fields, reminders that Italy has been bleeding slowly for decades. But today, the landscape feels strangely tense, as if the land itself knows what the Gothic kingdom is facing. A crisis not of numbers or weapons, but of leadership. You feel it even before the news spreads through the ranks. An unease, a sense that something inside the Ostrogothic world is splintering. And when word finally reaches camp, whispered from soldier to soldier like fire travelling through dry grass, it becomes official. The Ostrogoths cannot decide who should lead them. You're sitting near a cooking fire when a cavalry scout rides in, mud splashed to his chest, eyes wide with something between disbelief and dark amusement. "They're fighting each other," he blurts. "Not us, each other." The men around you lean forward. One scoffs. "Goths quarrelling? That's every evening for them." But the scout shakes his head. "No, this time it's worse. This time it's all the nobles." And suddenly the smoke from your fire smells sharper, like the scent before a storm. When the Ostrogoths first ruled Italy, they had Theodoric, a king whose presence could silence entire courts. His death left a void no one could fill, like a collapsed pillar in an old basilica. Now, you watch the consequences unfold across every battlefield and tower you pass. Belisarius's officers gather around a rough wooden table that evening. A map is spread out, held down with stones. One of them taps Ravenna sharply. "Witiges is king," he states. Another snorts. "King? More like a placeholder wearing a crown because no one else wanted to be murdered first." Laughter ripples, dark and knowing. The truth hits harder than the joke. The Gothic nobles didn't choose Witiges because he was strong. They chose him because he was convenient, and everyone knows convenience breeds weakness. You sit listening as the officers go on. Some Goths support Hildebad. Some want Eraric. Some whisper about Theodahad's relatives. Idiots, that coward was executed for a reason. The debate twists and knots itself like rope. Every Gothic noble pulling in a different direction, While Belisarius moves steadily in one through it all, Belisarius remains quiet, hands folding behind his back, eyes narrowed. You've seen that look before. He's not pleased. He's calculating. Finally he speaks. They are divided. We must give them no time to unite. Simple, controlled, sharp as a spear point. Over the next weeks, the crisis becomes painfully obvious in every town you approach. In one fortified village, Gothic defenders stand on the walls shouting curses at each other louder than at your soldiers. A disappointed voice mutters beside you, "We won't even need ladders to take this place." In another garrison, 2 Gothic captains arrive at the same time. With different orders, different strategies, different loyalties, they argue in front of their own troops until one finally storms away and takes half the forces with him. A Byzantine archer laughs, "Italy won't need us." It'll collapse from confusion, but you don't laugh, because the closer you come to Ravenna, the more the internal fracture feels like something dangerous. Not just for the Goths, but for Italy itself. A kingdom that tears itself apart leaves only ruins behind. One evening, a bedraggled messenger from central Italy slips into camp with a tale that spreads like wildfire. The Gothic nobles fought about strategy in Ravenna's hall Heldebad called Witiger's Week. Someone insulted someone else's mother. Swords were drawn. The council ended with 3 men dead and no decisions made. A soldier whistles low. That's leadership, another shrugs. Better than our old commanders back home. But the truth is this. Every hour the Ostrogoths spend arguing is an hour Belisarius uses to tighten his grip on Italy. You see it in action near the town of Oximum. As the Byzantines approach, half the Gothic defenders want to fight a pitched battle. The other half want to retreat to Ravenna. One commander insists they stay, another insists they leave. Result? They do neither. They fall into chaos. Belisarius's cavalry sweeps in, capturing the outer works before the defenders even know who's in charge. Nearby, a weary Gothic soldier drops his spear and mutters to your men, "If you want the keys, just take them. Our own nobles will kill us before you do." And he isn't joking. Yet the most heartbreaking moment comes days later, when you pass a monastery where displaced Gothic families have taken refuge. Women clutch children. Old men sit staring at the floor as if waiting for something. News, orders, hope. A young Gothic boy approaches a Byzantine soldier and asks in a shaky voice, "Who is our king now? We hear different names." The soldier hesitates. How do you explain a collapsing world to a child? He finally answers with gentle honesty, "Whoever can protect you." The boy nods slowly. "Then we have no king." You feel the weight of those words settle in your chest. But for Belisarius, this crisis is more opportunity than tragedy. At an evening war council, he stands before his generals, calm and composed. "Their unity is broken," he says. "We will use that. Each faction fights alone. We strike each one before it can join another." One officer frowns. "And if they finally rally behind Witiges?" Belisarius shakes his head. "They won't. Not now." You feel the tension lift slightly, not because the war is easy, but because Belisarius sees the battlefield not as a place of enemies and allies, but as a chessboard where the other side is too busy arguing to notice the checkmate forming. Still, you can't shake the dread that comes creeping in when the fires burn low. If the Ostrogoths had been united, if they'd followed a leader like Theodoric, if they weren't tearing themselves apart, this war might have broken the Byzantines long before Ravenna ever fell. But they weren't united. They didn't follow greatness. They did tear themselves apart. And now, the road to Ravenna lies open, not because it is weak, but because the kingdom meant to defend, it is shattering from within. The crisis isn't just political. It isn't just military. It's the slow death of Italy's last guardians, and you can feel it. Ravenna's fate is no longer a question of strength. It's a question of time. You feel the weight of it before you even see the walls. Rome isn't just a city you enter. It's a city that rises around you like a memory, a warning, and a promise all at once. After weeks of marching, you finally approach the battered gates of the Eternal City, and every soldier beside you goes quiet. Even the horses lower their heads, as if sensing they're stepping into something older and heavier than any war they've fought before. The people welcome Belisarius as though he were a long-lost general of the old empire returned from the dead. Senate envoys bow deeply, priests swing incense so thick the air tastes sweet, and crowds line the streets cheering so hard the sound rattles your ribs. Rome has changed hands more times in a generation than anyone can count, but for the first time in years the people feel hope. Then the hope evaporates overnight. Word spreads like a flash fire. Witiges is coming, with the entire Ostrogothic army, to take Rome back. And suddenly the city feels very small. The siege begins before dawn, one of those wet grey Italian mornings where the sky looks like a cold piece of iron. You stand on the Aurelian walls, breath steaming, fingers numb on your spear. Across the plains north of the city, campfires multiply like stars falling to earth. Hundreds, thousands, an ocean of Gothic shields and spears gathering just beyond bowshot. A soldier beside you swears softly. Is that all of them? Another answers, all that remain, enough to drown us twice over. Belisarius joins you on the rampart, cloak snapping in the wind. He studies the Gothic lines with the calm of a man puzzling out a board game. Then he gives a faint, almost amused hum. They aim to intimidate, he says. They may succeed, if Rome were ruled by children. Then he turns and begins assigning positions, his voice steady, controlled, almost soothing. You watch soldiers straighten at the sound of it. Fear doesn't disappear. It organises itself. The first Gothic assault comes midday. Drums thunder, war horns howl. The sound shakes dust from the ancient stones. Thousands of Gothic warriors surge forward, shields raised, ladders bouncing on their shoulders. Arrows streak across the sky, hitting tower and parapet with a dry, angry rattle. Your heart hammers so hard it feels like it's trying to escape your chest. "Archers now!" an officer shouts. You see the first volley leave the walls in a dark, coordinated wave. Arrows cut through the air with that terrible, beautiful hiss they always have, like the sound of fate being loosed. Goths drop. More step over them. The ladders slam against the walls. A roar rises. A wall of bodies pushes upward. You lean over, thrust your spear downward, feel it find armour, flesh, desperation. Smoke begins to cling to everything. Arrows burning pitch, pots of oil, fragments of cloth lit by torches. Somewhere behind you, people cry out prayers, voices shaking. The Goths climb, fall, climb again. Hours pass. Sweat freezes on your face. Your arms ache. Your ears ring. You think you might break. Until Belisarius rides to the walls personally shouting, "Hold! Rome has stood for 1,000 years. She will not fall to tired men today." It works. Somehow. It works. Night. The Goths withdraw, leaving groans and shattered ladders behind. Rome trembles. Not with fear, with hunger. Within weeks supplies dwindle. You see old senators bartering jewellery for a loaf of barley bread. Children gnaw stale crusts like starving dogs. Even the soldiers eat once a day. Witiges tightens the noose, blockading every approach. He's not trying to break the walls. He's trying to break Rome's stomach. The city that once fed millions now depends on miracle trickles of grain smuggled through Gothic lines by peasants who risk everything for a handful of coin or a whispered promise of protection. Belisarius refuses to surrender. He walks the streets daily, speaking to frightened crowds, promising that Rome has known sieges before and survived them all. But each day, you feel the tension rise. Each night, you hear coughing in the alleys. Each morning, the line outside the bakeries gets shorter. One day, a boy collapses beside a fountain. His mother wails, clutching him. A soldier near you mutters, "The Goths don't need to storm Rome. We're dying on our own." He isn't wrong. Then comes the most daring moment of all. One of those insane gambles that only Belisarius would try. A messenger rushes to him one morning. The Goths left the Milvian bridge unguarded for an hour. Belisarius looks up with a flash of wicked brilliance. Good, we only need 10 minutes. He gathers a detachment of cavalry. Fast, silent, deadly. You join them as the gates creak open. Wind slashes your face as horses thunder across the open ground. The Goths look up too late. You streak across the bridge, sweep through the countryside, and before anyone fully understands what's happening, you return with wagons, dozens of them, loaded with grain. The city cheers so loudly it feels like the walls vibrate. Belisarius only smiles faintly and says, "Again!" And you do it again and again and again. Small victories, tiny breaths of hope, just enough to keep Rome alive. The siege drags on for over a year. Not constant fighting. Worse than that. Waiting, starving, listening, enduring. Witiges tries everything. Direct assaults, tunnelling, flaming arrows, surprise cavalry raids. Belisarius counters all of it with brilliance that borders on madness. One day he orders men to open the city's postern gate, just to let the Goths think he's planning a sortie. They charge. He slams the gate and fires on the crowded bottleneck. Dozens fall. The Goths retreat, humiliated. Another day he disguises archers as peasants gathering firewood. When Gothic scouts ride close, dozens of arrows fly from haystacks. Witiges curses him from across the field. Belisarius just bows. But still, the hunger grows, and the city frays at the edges. One night you sit on the wall beside a fellow soldier chewing the last of your ration, stale bread that tastes like wet clay. He stares over the Gothic campfires, face hollow. Do you think the Goths will ever stop? You shake your head. No. Then how do we win? You hesitate. Before you can answer, the night wind carries the sound of distant chanting, the Goths singing battle hymns around their fires. You whisper the truth neither of you wants to say. We don't break the Goths. We outlast them. He closes his eyes. That sounds harder. And he's right. But slowly, quietly, imperceptibly, the Gothic siege weakens. Their supply lines falter. Their morale cracks. Their leaders argue. Their horses starve. Rome has not fallen. Rome has outlived them. And when the siege finally lifts, when the Gothic army pulls back in exhaustion instead of triumph, you feel a surge of impossible relief. Rome stands, Rome breathes, Rome lives. But Belisarius sees something deeper. He turns north, toward Ravenna, eyes narrowing. Witiges has withdrawn, he murmurs. He's retreating to his last refuge. He spurs his horse. Now we finish this war. And you realize the siege of Rome was only the prelude. The real battle, the end of Italy's glory, awaits in the marshlands of Ravenna. You leave Rome behind on a damp, grey morning, the kind where the air hangs heavy with mist and even the crows seem tired of war. The city's battered gates groan shut behind you, and for a moment you pause, hand resting on the old stone, feeling the weight of everything you survived there. Hunger, fear, night raids, the shadow of Witiges looming like a thundercloud. Somehow, against every expectation, Rome still stands. But now the road stretches north, and Belisarius rides at the front with a quiet urgency that tells you one truth. Witiges is running, and Ravenna is calling. Rome isn't safe yet. Not truly. You glance back and see the people standing atop the walls, watching the army depart with a mixture of gratitude and dread. They know the Goths could return. They know the war isn't over, but they also know that with Belisarius moving north, the tide is shifting slowly, brutally, decisively. You turn forward with the rest of the soldiers, boots sinking into the soft mud of early spring. The Via Flaminia winds through rolling fields dotted with ruined farms, and every so often you pass a lonely tower flying a tattered banner. Italy feels like a battlefield stretched thin across a graveyard. For the first 2 days the march is calm, too calm. Scouts return reporting Gothic movements far to the north, never close, always slipping away like shadows fleeing the dawn. On the 3rd day, news reaches the camp. Witiges has pulled his entire force back toward Ravenna, abandoning central Italy completely. Retreating, one soldier mutters. No, an officer corrects him grimly, concentrating. You feel a chill crawl down your spine, because a concentrated Gothic army in Ravenna means a siege far worse than Rome, and everyone knows it. That night, around a sputtering fire, the rumours grow sharper. A cavalryman leans in. Witiges is gathering grain, weapons, families, everything he means to hole up in Ravenna and starve us instead. A young recruit scoffs nervously. He can't starve us. We're the attackers. The cavalryman nods slowly. Exactly. And Ravenna has enough marsh, water and walls to outlast 10 Romes. You swallow hard. He's not exaggerating. The closer you march toward the Adriatic, the more you feel it. Italy changes. Fields become marsh. Roads turn to soggy tracks. Rivers meander through reedy wetlands where fog hangs low like ghostly veils. Frogs croak in the distance, shadows ripple across shallow canals. It feels like walking into a different world entirely. One shaped not by mountains or fields, but by water. And somewhere ahead, hidden in the mist, lies Ravenna. But not yet. Before you can break the Gothic stronghold, Belisarius must first break its outer ring. The town of Ariminum, modern Rimini, becomes your first major test. It guards the coastal road to Ravenna and is held by a determined Gothic garrison. As you approach, Gothic scouts streak across the far hills like arrows in human form. Belisarius lifts a hand calmly. Do not chase them, he says. Let them carry fear, not victory. His discipline holds the line. You set camp. You prepare. You wait. At dawn, Belisarius orders a feigned retreat, a classic trick that never fails. The Goths seize the bait. They charge from the town, shouting war cries, weapons raised, and suddenly Belisarius wheeled the cavalry. A thunderous impact, a spray of soil, shouts turning to screams. You watch the Gothic formation collapse like ice beneath a blow. Within an hour, Ariminum falls. A soldier beside you exhales shakily. One step closer, you nod. But somehow that doesn't feel comforting. Days later, your march bends inland where the marsh thickens, ditches fill with stagnant water, mosquitoes swarm, horses stumble. More than once you have to haul a comrade out of knee-deep mud threatening to swallow his boots. And then, near the village of Mevania, you encounter the first serious attempt by Witiges to stall you. A Gothic detachment blocks a narrow causeway guarded by wooden palisades and flanked by marshy pools. Their leader steps forward. A big man with blonde hair sticking out from his helmet like wet straw. He lifts his axe. "We hold this line," he roars. "Turn back." Belisarius rides to the front, unfazed. "Break their centre," he says calmly, "and keep moving." It sounds impossibly simple, but somehow his simplicity works. Infantry advances, shields lock, javelins fly. The swamp muffles the clash of metal as the two lines meet mud splashes. Shouts echo across the water. At one moment you slip, your knee plunging into cold sludge. A Gothic warrior charges toward you, axe raised. You throw your shield up just in time. The impact jarringly rattles your bones. You lunge, the blade of your spear finding his chest. He collapses into the mud, and the marsh swallows him like a hungry mouth. By midday, the causeway is yours, another step closer. Eventually, after more days of marching, villages appear with fewer Gothic banners. Farmers greet you cautiously, offering bread or water. They speak of the Goths withdrawing north, reinforcing Ravenna, fortifying its waterways, stockpiling grain. "Witiges is scared," one farmer says. A soldier beside you replies, "He should be. But you know fear is a dangerous thing. Cornered enemies fight harder." That night the officers meet in Belisarius's tent. You're outside, but the voices carry through the canvas. "We can't storm Ravenna," one officer argues. "The swamps protect it," another adds. "And the sea," says a third. "As long as they can resupply by ship, they'll never surrender." Belisarius answers, quiet but certain, "Then we cut off the sea." You hear the silence that follows, shocked, heavy, almost awed. A naval blockade against a city surrounded by marshes, in waters the Goths know better than any Byzantine sailor. It sounds impossible. But Belisarius has never cared much for impossible. The next morning you reach the outskirts of Ravenna's region, and everything changes. The land sinks into long stretches of marsh, glistening pools and tangled reeds swaying in the breeze. Birds cry overhead. The air smells of wet earth and salt. A veteran walking beside you mutters, This isn't a battlefield, this is a trap, and he's right. The road narrows to a strip of raised earth, barely wide enough for 2 men. Fog pools between the reeds. Shadows shift unnervingly. You realise you're no longer marching to Ravenna. You're marching into its jaws when you finally see the faint silhouette of Ravenna's distant walls. Just a smudge across water and marsh. It feels unreal. A city on an island. A fortress disguised as a lagoon. A capital wrapped in water like armour. This is Witigi's final refuge. This is Justinian's greatest prize. This is Italy's last stand. Belisarius reins in his horse and looks toward the distant city. He wants to end the war here, he murmurs. So we will. He turns to the men. Prepare the siege lines. You feel something tighten in your chest. Rome was survival, but Ravenna will be an ending, and you don't yet know whether that ending will be victory or ruin. The marshlands round Ravenna swallow sound the same way they swallow footsteps. Softly, slowly, and with a patience that feels almost predatory. You stand knee-deep in mud, boots sinking with every shift of your weight, as the morning fog thickens into a white curtain that hides everything beyond a few dozen paces. Somewhere ahead lies Ravenna, the Gothic capital, the final refuge of Witiges. But right now, all you see is water, reeds, and the pale breath of the swamp rising like ghosts. This isn't Italy anymore. This is Ravenna's world. A world shaped not by stone or soil, but by marsh, tide, and silence. Belisarius rides up the narrow causeway with a kind of determined calm that makes you feel braver than you are. His horse steps carefully, hooves squelching in the wet earth as officers follow behind, shivering in cloaks damp from the night mist. One of them whispers, "How do you siege a bog?" Another answers, "Carefully or not at all." But Belisarius knows the truth. Ravenna is not protected by walls alone. It is protected by nature, the ultimate fortress. You march for another hour before the fog breaks just enough for you to glimpse it, barely, faintly, like a mirage across the shifting water Ravenna. The last capital of the Western Roman Empire, a city sitting on a tangled island of canals, bridges and tidewater. Mosaic towers shimmering with trapped light walls rising like pale ribs out of the marsh. Church domes emerging like islands. And beyond all that, the faint smell of salt drifting in from the Adriatic. It looks beautiful. It looks impossible to take. It looks like the kind of place where an empire could make its last stand. Your stomach tightens because you know it's about to. Belisarius calls the army to halt at a patch of slightly higher ground. A rare slope of firm earth, in a landscape that's mostly water and reeds. Officers gather as he studies the distant city. Ravenna cannot be stormed, one of them states. Belisarius nods. Correct. It cannot be surrounded, another adds. Not entirely, Belisarius agrees. And it cannot be starved, a third insists. Not while the sea feeds them. At that, Belisarius turns. It can be starved, he says simply. If we take the sea. A hush falls. Every officer looks out toward the shimmering water. A blockade? Here? In this? Against a city built for water warfare? You feel your throat tighten. Belisarius continues as if reading your thoughts. The Goths are not sailors. Their strength is land. Their weakness is the Adriatic. He gestures eastward. We shall deny them the sea. You hear someone mutter behind you, "That is madness." Another answers, "This entire war is madness." But Belisarius is already issuing orders. You've seen him hold Rome. You've seen him cut through Gothic armies like water through cracked stone. If anyone can blockade a marsh fortress at the end of the world, it's him. Over the next days, you begin to understand the full scale of the war's devastation. Italy is dying. You pass villages so empty the wind whistles through abandoned doorways. Olive groves stand wild, unharvested. Fields have become wastelands of weeds and toppled fences. Every few miles you find a farmhouse burned, a villa looted, a church roof collapsed. A soldier riding beside you mutters, "There were once 1 million people in this land. Now there are shadows." In a roadside chapel gutted by raiders, you find a fresco half destroyed, Christ feeding the multitudes. The eyes are gone, the bread is gone. Only the hands remain, reaching out in a silent plea. The longer you march toward Ravenna, the more you feel the war gnawing at Italy's bones. Famine, plague, desertion, family after family fleeing to hill forts or monasteries, children digging for roots beside ruined walls. Italy isn't just a battleground. It's the victim. Rome may have survived the siege, but everywhere else you look, the war has turned a once vibrant land into a slow-moving funeral. One evening, as the sun sinks in a red smear across the marsh, you approach a small village clinging to the edge of the lagoon. The people emerge cautiously, thin, pale, exhausted. They offer fish and stale bread in exchange for protection. A woman with hollow eyes tells Belisarius, "The Goths take what we catch. Your soldiers take what they leave. What is there for my children?" Belisarius looks stricken, not with guilt, but with the weight of reality. He orders his men to leave what little supplies they can spare. It helps, but not enough. You sit by the water watching the villagers mend their nets with trembling fingers. A child nearby pokes at the mud with a stick, humming a tuneless song. The war has stolen the music from Italy. A soldier next to you whispers, "If this is glory, it tastes bitter." You don't answer, because it does. As days turn into weeks, the devastation becomes clearer. A monastery near the lagoon shelters dozens of refugees from shattered towns. Their leader, a grey-haired monk, tells you, "Rome stands because the world remembers it. These villages fall because no one does." His tone carries no bitterness, only truth. And you know, deep down, that this war, Justinian's grand vision, has bled the peninsula dry. Italy has become a rope pulled between two factions, fraying strand by strand. Yet even in the midst of ruin, the Gothic kingdom does something unexpected. They fight harder. Witiges may be battered, besieged, and unsupported, but he refuses to break from Ravenna. He sends envoys across Italy urging resistance. Some Gothic garrisons answer the call, forming small bands that strike at your supply lines and disappear into the forests. You chase them through ruined towns and over muddy hills. Ambushes flare. Skirmishes crackle like sparks in the night. At one burned-out villa you find corpses from both sides tangled together in the courtyard. The marble fountain stained brown with dried blood. A Latin inscription nearby reads, "Roma Aeterna Est." Rome is eternal. You stare at it, wondering if eternity looks like this. One night you sit with Belisarius and a few soldiers near a flickering campfire. The marsh hums with insects and distant frogs. Belisarius stares toward Ravenna's distant glow. A veteran asks, "Will taking Ravenna save Italy?" Belisarius answers quietly, "No, but leaving it in Gothic hands will destroy it entirely." Another soldier leans forward. "Then what becomes of Italy after?" Belisarius looks into the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "It will endure," he says softly, "but not as it once was." You feel the truth settle heavily in your chest. Whatever emerges after Ravenna falls, Italy, Rome, the Gothic people, none of it will resemble the world you marched into months ago. Because the war has done more than break walls, it has broken a civilization. And now, with Ravenna looming over the lagoon like a patient predator, one thing becomes painfully clear. This siege will be the final blow. Belisarius knows it. Witiges knows it. And you feel it with every step you take toward the marsh. The end of Italy's ancient glory isn't coming, it has already begun. By now, the marshes around Ravenna feel almost familiar, like a miserable, soggy second home. Your boots are permanently damp, your cloak smells like swamp, and if someone offered you a dry road, you'd probably cry from joy. But Belisarius doesn't march on comfort. He marches on position, and there's one truth everyone in camp now understands. You don't take Ravenna by charging it. You take Ravenna by closing its world one ring at a time. That means one thing for you. Town after town, outpost after outpost, every little tooth in the jaw around Ravenna has to be pulled. You start with the nearby coastal roads. The army shifts slightly south and east. tracing the curve of the Adriatic like a careful hand drawing a noose. Small Gothic garrisons hold a string of settlements. Nothing glorious, nothing huge, but each one is a stepping stone of food, shelter, and communication for Ravenna. Belisarius doesn't storm them recklessly. He squeezes. At Rimini, you've already seen how quickly he can break a position. Now the same pattern unfolds across lesser towns. Scouts ride ahead, measuring walls and morale. Infantry arrives in disciplined lines. Envoys offer terms with unnerving calm. If you surrender, one Byzantine officer says at a small fortified village, you keep your lives and your grain. If you resist, we take both. The Gothic captain on the wall looks down at his tired men, then at the silent, organised ranks below. His shoulders drop. The gates open. You enter to find the townsfolk watching with wary eyes, but instead of sack and slaughter, Belisarius sets guards at granaries and orders strict discipline. Some soldiers grumble, no looting, no bonus pay, but most are too exhausted to argue. A local elder says quietly, "The Goths took what they needed by force, you take it by rules. Which is worse, I wonder? You don't have a good answer. That's becoming a theme." Next, Belisarius turns his attention to the roads that matter, the ones that feed Ravenna caravan routes from the Po Valley. River crossings. Bridges that don't look like much on a map but mean everything when you've got wagons of grain. You find yourself posted near one of these bridges one chilly morning, watching mist drift off the water. It feels like just another miserable shift, until Gothic riders appear, leading pack animals loaded with sacks. "Hold!" your captain shouts, stepping out with a raised hand. The Gothic leader narrows his eyes. "This road leads to Ravenna, stand aside." Your captain doesn't blink. It used to. Now it leads nowhere unless Belisarius allows it. For a heartbeat you expect a clash. Shields, swords, chaos. Instead, the Gothic riders stare at the river, the blocked road, the silent ranks behind your captain. Then, without a word, they turn their horses and ride back the way they came. You watch them go, stomach twisting. Every denied wagon is another thread cut from Ravenna's lifeline. Then comes the big one. The name that sends a murmur through camp every time it's mentioned. Classis, Ravenna's great port. Once the home base of the Western Roman Navy, now the city's sea gate to the world. Belisarius knows what everyone else knows. As long as Classis sends ships into Ravenna, the siege is nothing but an inconvenience. So he moves. You approach Classis under a low, leaden sky. The town sits perched on the water's edge, docks stretching like wooden fingers into the lagoon ships bob gently in the harbour. Gothic, mostly, sturdy but not elegant, like floating pieces of carved oak. The walls aren't massive, but they're solid, and the Goths inside know they're guarding Ravenna's throat. "No frontal assault," one officer mutters. "We'd get cut down before we touch the gate." Belisarius smiles faintly. "Then we won't touch the gate." You'd be worried if you weren't used to that tone by now. At night, you help drag light boats through the marshy channels, oars wrapped in cloth to muffle their scrape. You move like a shadow, breath misting, hands numb, hoping the frogs and reeds make more noise than you do. By dawn, you're in position, part of a surprise pincer from both land and water. On Belisarius's signal, horns sound from the landward side. Byzantine troops surge toward the walls, shields up, shouting, arrows fly. The Goths rush to the ramparts, pouring missiles and curses down on the attackers. They never see the boats until it's too late. From the seaward side, your small flotilla sweeps toward the docks. Fast, tight, coordinated. You leap from the boat onto slick wood, nearly slipping, not your proudest heroic moment, and dash toward the harbour gate. Other squads do the same, axes and hooks flashing. Within minutes, the gate to the portside entrance is forced. You burst into a courtyard from the back while your comrades still hammer the landward walls out front. The Goths spin in confusion. How? From where? Too late. The defence buckles from inside. The landward pressure suddenly breaks through as well. Within hours, the banners of the Eastern Empire snap above the harbour. Classis is yours. A soldier beside you looks at the captured ships and grins. Well, there goes Ravenna's pantry. Another answers, and its front door. With classes taken, the noose tightens brutally. Belisarius turns the port against Ravenna itself, stationing patrols to seize any vessel headed toward the city, fortifying piers with archers, using captured ships to patrol the lagoon and Adriatic coast. One day, you help haul up nets the sailors cast nearer the main channel. Instead of fish, they pull in intercepted barrels of grain and amphorae of oil meant for Ravenna. The sailors laugh. You don't, because every captured barrel means someone in Ravenna goes hungry. Over the next weeks, the pattern repeats with variations. A small village controlling a narrow canal surrenders after Belisarius simply stands outside it for a day, saying nothing, doing nothing. The message is clear. You will run out of food before we run out of patience. A fortified manor on a low rise holds out stubbornly until Byzantine engineers divert a nearby stream, turning its surrounding land into sludge. The defenders wake up practically on an island, their horses useless, their supplies cut. They capitulate in 3 days. A Gothic watchtower overlooking a quay crossing refuses to surrender. Belisarius doesn't storm it. He builds an earthwork behind it and ignores it completely, leaving it stranded with no one to watch. After a week, the garrison climbs down and walks over to your side, weapons reversed, too hungry to care about honour. One by one, every position that matters falls or is neutralised. The ring around Ravenna doesn't look like a perfect circle, but it functions like one. Every road? Blocked or dangerous. Every canal? Watched. Every ship route? Patrolled. Witiges still holds his capital, but he holds it in a shrinking bubble one evening standing on a low rise near the captured harbour of Classis. You can just make out Ravenna's skyline across the water. A thin mist hangs between you and the city, turning it into a shifting silhouette of spires and walls. A comrade beside you squints. Think they're afraid yet? You exhale slowly. They should be. He nods. And we? You give a tired half shrug. We're too tired to be afraid, he chuckles weakly. Fair. You watch smoke curl from Ravenna's chimneys, rising into the dimming sky, and you understand. Belisarius isn't racing toward a dramatic, decisive clash. He's tightening fingers around a throat, not to crush in one blow, but to squeeze until there's no air left. And in that quiet, relentless strategy, you can already see the end taking shape not tomorrow, not even next month, but soon. Ravenna is still standing, but the world around it is slipping away. The marshland deepens into something almost unreal as you approach the final stretch before Ravenna's walls. The earth becomes a trembling sponge beneath your boots. Each step makes a soft, sucking sound, as though the ground itself wants to pull you under. Reeds rise taller than a man, swaying in slow, eerie rhythm. Canals wind through the landscape like veins, reflecting a dim grey sky that never seems to brighten, even at midday. And then, through the haze of mist and water, you finally see it properly, Ravenna. Not the distant dream you glimpsed before, not the faint outline through fog, but the real thing, a city floating between land and sea. Massive walls rise straight out of the water, canals cut through the city like mirrors. Mosaic-tiled churches shimmer faintly even in miserable weather. Wooden piers reach out from the city like skeletal arms. Watchtowers sit perched on islands, connected by narrow bridges that look like threads sewn through the marsh. It doesn't look like a fortress. It looks like a puzzle someone dropped into a lake centuries ago. And it's beautiful. Terrifyingly beautiful. You stop on a ridge of firmer earth and take in the whole sight. A soldier beside you lets out a slow whistle. That, he murmurs, is not a city built by men. That's a city built by water. Another replies, which means we take it by drowning or starving, nothing else. No one argues. Belisarius rides to the front, studying the city with narrowed eyes. His horse snorts uneasily at the stench of algae and brackish channels. Officers gather around him, their cloaks fluttering in the cold wind sweeping across the marsh. One of them breaks the silence. We can't even get close with siege engines. There's no ground to stand on. Another grumbles, "Even ladders would sink. We'd need boats and they'd be easy targets." A third adds, "And if we storm a canal district, we'll drown before the Goths kill us." Belisarius nods slowly, absorbing every word. Then he simply says, "Good. That means Witiges cannot attack either. It's true, Ravenna can defend itself, but it cannot strike out. The marsh protects it as much as it isolates it." You realise something with a cold shiver. Ravenna's defences are perfect for a dying kingdom, not for conquest, not for expansion, for endurance, nothing else. A fortress built to survive the end of the world, which, in a sense, it now is. A detachment of scouts returns that afternoon with more details. The marsh around Ravenna isn't uniform. It's a labyrinth of channels, tidal pools, floodplains, and artificial dikes built over centuries. Some areas are shallow enough to cross with a plank or two. Others could swallow a horse whole. One scout reports, "There's a stretch of land we could set up a forward camp on, 2 bowshots from the eastern gate, but any approach from there puts us in open water." Another adds, "The western side is worse, pure swamp deeper than a man's height." Belisarius asks, "And the northern ground?" The scout hesitates. "More stable, but watched. Gothic patrols move in boats. They vanish into the reeds like fish." A soldier mutters, "How do you siege a city patrolled by fishermen?" The officer beside him replies under his breath, very carefully, or very slowly. Both are correct. You march to your new positions over the next days, slogging through mud that seems deliberately designed to embarrass you. You slip twice. You curse your boots. You lose one boot entirely to a particularly treacherous patch of marsh and have to dig it out with both hands while your comrades laugh kindly, and then slip themselves, which evens the score nicely. Then you reach your assigned line, a narrow ridge overlooking a wide canal that leads to Ravenna's southern gates. The city looks almost serene from here, too serene. The gates are closed. The walls are quiet. No banners flutter, no taunts ring out, just watchful silence. Gothic archers occasionally appear on battlements, scanning the marsh like statues carved from pale stone. A comrade whispers, "You ever seen a city that looks like it's waiting to swallow you before?" You shake your head. No, you haven't. Over the next week you learn Ravenna's rhythms. At dawn, faint bells echo from within the city, church bells deep and solemn. Then patrol boats glide from the inner canals into the outer marsh, silent except for the faint creak of oars. Gothic sentries shift positions at midday, fires burn in the towers by evening, and at night the marsh becomes alive with eerie noises, frogs, insects, wind slipping through reeds, distant splashes from unseen creatures. You sleep poorly. In one patrol shift you wade through water up to your thighs, feeling reeds brush your hands like fingers. Something darts past your leg. Fish, probably. You try not to think about it. Another soldier bleats out a startled noise when something brushes his foot. The whole squad laughs for 5 straight minutes simply because fear has made everyone a little unhinged. On another night you hear oars cutting water very close. Shadows move across the canal. Gothic boats, 3 of them. Your squad freezes. They glide past silently, torches extinguished. A soldier whispers, "Do they ever sleep?" Your captain answers, "Not if they're starving." He doesn't say the rest out loud. Not if they fear being forgotten by their king in a dying city surrounded by marsh. The engineers try to find stable ground for siege weapons. They fail. One attempts to set a heavy wooden frame on a patch of solid-looking mud. The frame sinks on one side within seconds. The engineer mutters something about quitting the army and becoming a winemaker. Everyone agrees he would excel. Archers try to test range from several points, but distance and water distort everything. Even sound echoes strangely. You shout to a friend 10 paces away, and your voice bounces back as though someone whispered behind you. It's unnerving. The marsh isn't just a battlefield, it's a psychological weapon. Witiges didn't create it, but he knows exactly how to use it. One evening, as the sun bleeds across the water, turning it red like diluted wine, you sit atop a hummock of dryish land and watch Ravenna's walls glow in the fading light. Belisarius approaches quietly and stands beside you. You straighten, but he gestures for you to relax. He speaks softly. Do you see how still the city is? You nod. Stillness is not strength, he says. Stillness is fear condensed. You glance at him. Fear of what? He looks toward the distant walls. Fear of running out of everything except hope. He mounts his horse, the reeds swaying around its legs, and adds, "We will give them a choice soon. But first, we must make them listen." As he rides off, the marsh wind picks up, rippling the water, whispering through reeds, and you understand. The siege of Ravenna won't be fire and ladders. It won't be grand assaults or heroic charges. It will be a slow, suffocating tightening. The kind of siege that ends not with battle, but with surrender whispered in exhaustion. Ravenna is impregnable, but it is not sustainable, and you can feel its end beginning. You wake to the sound of raised voices, sharp, anxious, urgent. When you step out of your tent, the marsh air hits you like a damp sheet, cool and heavy with the smell of reeds and brackish water. Officers cluster around Belisarius, faces tense, and scouts kneel before them, mud dripping from their boots. You catch fragments of the report. They've sent riders west, and messengers slipping through at night, seeking allies. All at once, the truth lands like a spear in your gut. Ravenna is calling for help. The Ostrogoths know they cannot stand alone. The marsh may protect their walls. The sea may feed them a little longer. But Belisarius's net is closing, and Witiges feels the pressure. You push closer as the scouts finish their report. "They ride toward the Po Valley, my lord," one says breathlessly. "They carry the king's seal. We believe they seek support from the Franks." A murmur spreads through the officers like a ripple in dark water. The Franks, the rising power north of the Alps, hundreds of thousands strong, hungry for expansion, unpredictable as a storm. If the Franks answer Ravenna's call, this siege becomes a death sentence. Belisarius's expression doesn't change. He simply nods once, the way he does when information fits the shape of a strategy he already foresaw. "We will intercept what we can," he says calmly, "but the Franks will decide by their own ambition." An officer mutters, "Ambition is exactly what I'm afraid of." You don't say it aloud, but you agree. A kingdom collapsing is dangerous. A kingdom begging for salvation is worse. That evening, the camp buzzes like a hive of anxious bees. Soldiers sharpen blades, mend cloaks, and whisper warnings. The Franks are brutal fighters. They don't care if you're Roman, Gothic, or Byzantine. They kill first and sort the bones later. If they cross the Alps, it won't be a battle. It'll be a flood. You sit with a group of veterans perched on a low peat mound. One of them twists a piece of reed between his fingers and says, "If the Franks come, it doesn't matter who wins. Italy loses." The others nod. You stare out over the marsh, at the distant silhouette of Ravenna's walls, wondering how many kings, warriors, and empires have whispered the same fear. Italy has always been a prize. Beautiful, rich, broken, irresistible. And now, in its moment of weakness, wolves smell blood. 3 days later, the fear becomes reality. Rain lashes your face as you slog through knee-deep mud on patrol. A rider approaches from the west, horse panting, armour dented. His face is pale under streaks of mud. "The Franks have crossed the Alps." Your captain grabs his reins. "How many?" "Thousands, tens of thousands. I don't know. Enough to trample the Po Valley like wheat." The word spread through the marsh like lightning. Soldiers stop mid-step. Officers run to Belisarius's command tent. Even the local peasants, thin, exhausted, resigned, whisper prayers under their breath. You hear a Byzantine marine mutter, "We should have burned the Alps when we had the chance." Another replies, "Pretty sure that's not how mountains work." Still, no one laughs. When the officers gather around Belisarius, you stay just close enough to hear the discussion. "The Franks will devour the Goths," one says. "Good. Let them." "No, not good." "Why?" "Because they'll devour us next." Belisarius raises a hand and silence ripples outward. "Witiges will beg the Franks for aid," he says, "but they are opportunists. They do not rescue, they plunder. He steps to the map pinned across a crate. His finger taps the Po Valley. Here, this is where they enter. They will sweep across these farmlands, pillaging as they go. Then he moves his finger slowly, deliberately toward the marsh around Ravenna. And if they reach this city, they will not fight for the Goths. They will take Ravenna for themselves. The officers pale, because that means something worse than failure. It means catastrophe. Imagine it, a Frankish kingdom holding Ravenna at the mouth of the Adriatic, with Italy at its feet and Constantinople powerless to stop them. You understand instantly why Belisarius cannot let that happen. Over the next days you see frantic movement from Ravenna's walls. Gothic riders depart in small, swift groups, taking hidden paths through the marsh. Their boats slip toward the open sea. Ravens fly overhead carrying messages tied to their legs. Witiges isn't waiting for rescue. He's begging for it. Inside the city, signals flicker from the watchtowers, torches at odd hours, smoke patterns drifting through the air. It's clear they're coordinating, preparing, pleading for allies. You overhear one scout mutter, "A drowning man grabs anything, even a sword." The Franks finally make contact. A Gothic envoy returns to Ravenna under a white banner. Your spies report that the man brings news the city barely dared hope for. The Franks are willing to help, but the help is not free. The Franks demand payment. Land, gold, alliances, hostages, promises, and not small ones. They want half of Italy, a scout whispers. Half. A soldier beside you chokes on his water. Half? They haven't even won it. That's the Franks, someone mutters. They charge interest before the battle. You imagine Ravenna's leaders in a smoky hall listening to this demand. You imagine their jaws tightening. You imagine the fear beneath their anger. Because Witiges has no choice. He is cornered, and when a king is cornered, he will give anything away to breathe for one more season. But the Franks, being the Franks, do not rush to Ravenna's side. They spread across northern Italy like a disease, burning, stealing, killing, breaking. They pillage Gothic lands. They pillage Roman lands. They pillage any lands. Some allies, a soldier grumbles while watching smoke rise from the far hills. Another spits into the mud. At this rate, they'll conquer northern Italy by accident. But here's the important part. They don't march to Ravenna. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They're too busy looting to commit to a siege, which means the Franks are both a disaster and a blessing. A disaster for Italy, but a blessing for Belisarius. Because the longer the Franks roam freely, the more the Gothic world collapses into chaos. Allies become enemies. Enemies become vultures, and Ravenna becomes isolated by the very power it sent for help. One night you stand on watch at the edge of the marsh, torch in hand. Ravenna glows faintly in the distance. The stars reflect in the water. And from somewhere far north, you hear a dull rumble, like distant thunder. A soldier beside you shivers. Is that the Franks? You nod. Probably. He swallows. You think they'll come help Witiges? You shake your head. I think they'll help themselves. He lets out a slow exhale. Good. For once their greed helps us. You gaze out over the dark, gleaming channels. Ravenna sought allies. But instead it found something worse. A force that weakens everything it touches. And in that weakness, Belisarius sees opportunity. Not to destroy the Goths, but to end the war. Soon. Very soon. The Franks won't save Ravenna. They'll only hasten its fall, and you can feel it. The city's last hope has become its last burden. The air over the Adriatic changes long before you see the ships. It carries a new sharpness, saltier, colder, restless, like the sea itself is bracing for what's coming. You stand on a narrow stretch of marshy shoreline east of Classis, boots sinking slightly with every step, and watch the horizon darken with something big. Something disciplined. Something Byzantine. Then the masts appear. 1, 5, a dozen. More. The Imperial fleet arrives like a silent storm, sleek dromons cutting through the water, sails snapping in the wind, oars rising and falling in perfect rhythm. A soldier beside you breathes, "Holy saints!" as the forest of masts approaches the lagoon. Belisarius steps onto the wet sand just as the first ship glides in. The admiral salutes sharply. "My lord, the emperor sends strength." Belisarius nods once, calm but satisfied. "You have arrived just in time." Because Ravenna, protected by marsh and sea, has always depended on that seafood. Messages, allies, hope. Everything flows through its harbours like blood through arteries, and now, for the first time in this brutal war, the Byzantines are ready to choke those arteries shut. The next days unfold like a well-planned trap. The fleet fans out into the Adriatic, forming a moving wall of hulls and armed decks. Dromons anchor at key points along the coast, their prows painted with monstrous eyes that stare across the waves. Others sail into the outer lagoon, skirting the edges of Ravenna's watery moat. Your job? Stand knee-deep in the marsh with a signal torch and guide the ships into the narrow channels without grounding them on hidden sandbars. It's not glamorous, it's not heroic, but it's necessary. One marine grumbles, "If I sink one more time, I'm joining the clergy." Another replies, "You? You'd turn holy water into soup." Still, the missteps are few. The fleet settles in like sharpened teeth around the edges of the lagoon. Ravenna's reaction is immediate and panicked. At dawn, you watch small Gothic boats push out from the city, oars churning furiously, only to freeze when they see the Byzantine ships waiting, lines drawn tight, archers poised. The Gothic rowers hesitate. One captain tries to turn back. Another tries to push forward, waving a small flag, shouting something you cannot hear. A droman signals back with a single flaming arrow fired high into the sky. A warning, not an attack. Yet. The Gothic boats retreat. By noon, Ravenna's docks are nearly deserted. Markets near the harbours go silent. The city that once fed itself from the sea now stares at empty water, like a starving man locked out of his own pantry. The blockade tightens with clockwork precision. Ships patrol the coastline, stopping any vessel approaching Ravenna. Marines board fishing boats, searching for hidden sacks of grain or messages tucked under planks. Archers take positions on anchored dromons to fire warning shots at anything that moves toward the city. Watchtowers at Classis send smoke signals across the marsh to coordinate intercepts. Every day, you see the same scene. A small fishing boat approaches. A dromon veers toward it like a hungry shark. The fishermen throw up their hands, pleading. Marines search the boat. They find nothing but nets and a few sad-looking eels. The boat is allowed to pass. But the message has been delivered anyway. Ravenna eats only what Belisarius allows, and Belisarius allows nothing. Inside the city, panic grows behind the walls. You hear it from deserters, ragged men who swim across the marsh at night, or steal boats to drift toward Byzantine lines, teeth chattering, hands trembling, clothes soaked. One deserter, a young Gothic soldier with mud crusted to his beard, collapses near your fire. When revived, he whispers, "They said the sea would save us. They promised. We kept watch for sails, for help, for anything." He stares at the ground. But the sea is empty now, empty as our granaries. Another deserter joins him, older and gaunt. The king tries to keep order, but the people are afraid. They whisper of famine. They whisper of surrender. They whisper that our gods have left us. He looks up at Ravenna's distant walls, glowing faintly in the moonlight. That city is a tomb. Then comes the first true test of the blockade. A heavy merchant ship, wide, low, and loaded with cargo, creeps into view from the north. Its sails are patched, its crew waves frantically. Someone on board shouts that they carry grain for the starving. Ravenna sees it too. Gothic archers gather on the walls shouting encouragement. Citizens cluster along the canals. Hope flickers like a spark in a windstorm. Belisarius gives the order, intercept. You board a small Byzantine skiff with a team of marines oars churn. The boat leaps forward. 2 dromons flank you, cutting off escape. The merchant crew panics, trying to swing wide toward a hidden canal. Too slow. Your skiff rams their hull. Marines leap aboard. You climb after them, boots slipping on wet planks. The cargo hold is opened. Sacks spill forward. Grain, vegetables, jars of oil. The crowd on Ravenna's walls lets out a collective cry of desperation. The captain of the merchant ship falls to his knees. "Please," he begs, "we will starve without this." Belisarius's voice echoes from the lead droman. "You should not have sailed to Ravenna. The decision is cold logical, inevitable. The grain is confiscated. The ship is seized. The crew is allowed to go ashore, away from Ravenna. The blockade holds you watch the walls, you watch the people. Hope dies there, just a little." The following days are filled with nothing but emptiness. Empty sea, empty docks, empty bellies inside the city. The blockade becomes a noose, drawing tighter with every sunrise. No food, no reinforcements, no letters, no messages, no escape by water. A fellow soldier says softly, "We're not fighting them anymore, we're watching them drown." You don't answer, because it's true. On the 10th day of the blockade, you spot Ravenna's harbour from a raised mound. The ships sit still. The markets sit empty. The water sits pale and undisturbed. It looks like a painting of a city waiting for a funeral. A cold wind stirs the reeds. Belisarius stands beside you, arms crossed. "They will soon understand," he murmurs, "that without the sea, Ravenna is already lost." He turns to you. "Now comes the hard part." You swallow. "Harder than starving a capital?" Belisarius smiles faintly, sadly. "Yes, much harder. Because taking a city through blockade isn't just about hunger, it's about crushing hope, breaking will, waiting until the enemy chooses surrender over death. You look toward Ravenna, lonely and shining across the water it still stands, but you can feel it weakening, thin, frayed, cracked beneath its own silence. The sea once protected Ravenna, now it imprisons it, and the end is coming. Slow, suffocating, inevitable. You don't go into Ravenna through a gate so much as you slip into it like a fish through a net. One day you're outside, watching the city from across the marsh, and the next you're moving through its narrow streets behind a small Byzantine delegation, under a white flag, allowed in to discuss terms, deliver messages, and, if we're honest, quietly take the temperature of a city under siege. You feel the difference the moment you pass under the shadow of the walls. The air inside is different. It smells of brackish canals, old incense, and hunger. Not the sharp, sudden hunger of a missed meal. The slow, dull ache of months of not quite enough. Ravenna is still beautiful, in a way that hurts to look at now. Mosaic walls shimmer dimly inside churches, tiny cubes of gold and coloured glass catching whatever light they can. Columns still stand where emperors once walked. Statues peer down from niches with that classic, slightly superior Roman gaze, as if even now they're judging everyone's posture and politics. But the people tell a different story. You see it first in the eyes, sunken, shadowed, restless, in the way clothes hang a little too loosely, in the way children don't run so much as drift. Food stalls that once overflowed with fish, bread, figs, oil, and wine now stand half empty, or shuttered altogether. The canal markets are quiet. The usual clatter of traders arguing prices has been replaced by low murmurs and the occasional hissed quarrel when someone tries to cut in line. At a small square near the harbour, you watch citizens queue for grain rations under the watchful eyes of Gothic soldiers. The sacks are fewer than the crowd, much fewer. A woman at the back of the line whispers to her neighbour, "Do you think there will be anything left when we reach the front?" Her neighbour responds without looking at her, "There wasn't yesterday." You feel that one in your bones. Inside the palace district, Witigue's court is a grim parody of royal dignity. Once feasts would have glittered here, tables laden with meat and wine, ambassadors from distant lands seated under frescoed ceilings. Now the great hall echoes. The tapestries are still rich, the floor still polished, but the platters hold thin stews and stale bread. Even the torches seem fewer, as if the city is rationing light itself. You stand off to the side as Gothic nobles argue in low, urgent voices. "We must hold," one insists. "The Franks will come. They promised." Another scoffs. The Franks promised themselves our lands. They're busy taking them. A third bangs his fist on the table. Better a Frankish overlord than chains to Byzantium. From his seat, Witiges listens, jaw tight, shoulders slumped just enough to betray exhaustion. The crown on his head seems too heavy now, like a joke made in gold. "Silence," he finally says, voice hoarse. "We have food for months yet." A hollow lie, and everyone knows it. A steward standing near the wall flinches almost imperceptibly. You catch his eye for a moment. His expression says what no one dares to voice out loud. Weeks, not months. You wander the streets later, escorted by a couple of wary Gothic guards who've been told you are under safe conduct. The phrase does not make you feel safe. You pass a bakery, its doors open, its shelves nearly bare. A handful of loaves sit on the counter like relics. A boy stands outside staring at them, lip trembling. His mother holds his hand, whispering, "We'll get ours tomorrow." You glance at the baker. His eyes meet hers, then yours. You both know there may not be a tomorrow loaf. In a side alley, you see two men arguing over a crate of salted fish. One claims it belongs to his family. The other insists it was taken from his dead brother's store. Their words escalate. Shoves follow. For a moment you think steel will flash, but instead both simply sag, out of breath, too weak to actually fight. Hunger has taken the edge off even their rage. The canals, once Ravenna's lifelines, now look strangely still. Boats don't come and go as much. A few fishermen still cast nets, but the catches are small. Too many lines in the same exhausted water. The fish population is probably filing a complaint somewhere. You watch a group of youths haul in a pitiful catch. 3 small, twitching fish. They stare at the net as if waiting for more to magically appear. Finally one mutters, "We'll lie to my mother. Tell her half went to the taxman on the quay." You almost want to throw your rations at them almost. Then you remember, your own camp is hardly luxuriant. This war has turned everyone into accountants of hunger. Whispers of sickness begin to crawl through the city like a draft under a door. People who are underfed become people who are too weak to fight off disease. Coughs sound sharper, longer. A stallholder wipes her nose on her sleeve, hand shaking, then goes back to measuring a miserly scoop of barley. A child lies listlessly on a step while his father fans him with a bit of broken palm leaf, murmuring a prayer. In the church of San Vitale the mosaics gleam. Justinian and his court frozen in eternal luxury on the wall, purple robes and jewelled diadems shining below. The pews are filled with thin faces, clasped hands, and eyes that look up at figures of imperial abundance and think, "Must be nice you kneel near the back listening. Deliver us from hunger. Protect our children. Make our king wise, or at least less stubborn." You stifle a smile at that last one. Even in crisis, someone always slips in one honest line. Meanwhile, discipline strains at the seams. You hear it from a Gothic guard who leans against his spear near a gate. "Soldiers grumble," he admits. "We bleed for this city, and yet we eat poorer than the nobles." Another guard mutters, "Last week a patrol broke into a warehouse, said it was for inspection. Walked out heavier than they walked in." Their voices are bitter, tired, edged with something dangerous. When armies are full, they fight for honour. When they're starving, they fight for bread. And Ravenna is running low on both. At night, the city changes again. Torches are fewer. Windows are darker. Voices are lower. You walk along a canal path with your escort, hearing distant arguments muffled by thin walls. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere else, someone coughs until they choke. A drunk lurches from a doorway, then thinks better of it and retreats. No one has spare energy for brawls tonight. One of your Gothic guards sighs. "When I was a boy," he says, "my father told me Ravenna would stand forever, that it outlasted emperors, generals, coups, that nothing could touch it." He looks toward the shadowed walls. He didn't mention hunger. You meet a group of local Roman citizens in a courtyard. A faded aristocrat, a minor clerk, a priest, a craftsman missing 3 fingers. They talk carefully, measuring every word, glancing toward the Gothic escort at the edge of the square. "Some say we should surrender," the aristocrat murmurs. The craftsman snorts. Some say that out loud. The priest clasps his hands. God tests us. The clerk shakes his head. God has been testing Italy for 100 years. At some point you have to wonder if we've failed. They all look at you, the Byzantine observer in the middle of their collapsing world. What will your general do? The aristocrat asks. Burn us? Spare us? Replace our Goths with tax collectors? You hesitate. He wants the city, you say carefully, not your graves. The aristocrat nods once. That, he replies, is slightly comforting. Days pass. Rations shrink. Lines lengthen. Tempers fray. And yet, somehow, Ravenna doesn't explode. It sags. People move slower. Voices drop. Arguments become shrugs. The city is like a great animal in winter, curled up, heartbeat slowing, waiting to see if spring will come or if this is simply the end. From the walls at dusk you watch the faint glow of Byzantine fires in the distance. Beyond them lies an Italy ground down by war. Inside lies a kingdom starving behind beautiful mosaics, and you understand, with a clarity that makes your stomach clench, Ravenna cannot hold forever. Not like this. Not against blockade, hunger, fear, and the slow erosion of hope. Soon the people will turn on the king. Soon the soldiers will turn on their orders. Soon the city will have to choose between pride and survival, and when that moment comes, it won't be arrows or rams that break Ravenna. It will be empty stomachs and exhausted hearts. By now Ravenna feels like a city holding its breath, not in anticipation, but in sheer, exhausted stubbornness. The hunger has settled in. The silence has thickened. The people move like sleepwalkers between church, ration line, and home. The Goths on the wall stare out at the marsh, not with defiance anymore, but with a kind of dull resignation. And outside those walls, Belisarius watches patiently. He's done flinging spears, he's done testing the marsh, he's done waiting for the Franks to suddenly become competent allies. Now he's going to do something far more dangerous. He's going to talk. It begins quietly. One morning, you see a small boat push off from the Byzantine side of the lagoon. White banner fluttering from a short pole, no armour, no siege engines, just a handful of men in cloaks rowing steadily toward Ravenna's main watergate. Envoys? A soldier beside you mutters. Either the war is nearly over or it's about to become very complicated. Probably both. From the walls, Gothic archers raise bows, then pause as they see the white cloth. Orders are shouted. The boat is allowed closer. The gate creaks open just enough for the party to slip inside. The war doesn't stop. The hunger doesn't stop. The blockade doesn't stop. But something new has entered the equation. Terms. Hours later, word leaks back out. Nothing official, just murmurs filtering through deserters and sympathizers. Belisarius has offered Witiges safe conduct, one whispers near the camp. Not just safe conduct, another adds. He offers to let the Goths keep lands titles, some of them at least. You jerk your head up at that. This isn't a demand for unconditional surrender. It's something far more clever, a soft landing for a kingdom that knows it's falling. That night, around a smoky fire, officers argue. We should crush them, one says. They starved Rome. They ravaged Italy. Let them see how it feels when mercy is not on the table. Another replies, we don't have men or years to waste on a hopeless last stand. If they will bend, let them. A third adds quietly, besides, if we humiliate them, they'll just rise in revolt later, again and again and again. You sit listening, chewing on a chunk of stale bread and realizing that sometimes the most powerful weapon in a siege isn't a battering ram. It's a promise inside Ravenna. The offer hits like a thrown stone on still water. You're there a few days later, once again under a white flag, as the Gothic leadership convenes in the palace hall. You stand off to the side, technically just an observer, but no one really believes that you might as well be wearing a sign that says, I'm here so Belisarius knows how loud you shouted. Envoys read out the general's proposal in careful measured Latin. His Imperial Majesty Justinian offers clemency to the Gothic nobility and warriors who lay down arms and submit to imperial rule. Lands may be retained under the emperor's authority. Those who choose may serve in the imperial army. Wittigers shall be treated with dignity and transported safely to Constantinople. The hall buzzes with tense, overlapping whispers. One noble leaps to his feet. "We are kings in this land, not tenants." Another snaps back. "You are kings of hunger and rubble." A third snarls. "Better to die with a crown than live under another man's tax scroll." From his seat at the front, Wittiger sits very still. His eyes flick from envoy to nobles to his thin-faced guards. You can see the weight of months weighing on his shoulders. Failed sieges, broken promises, the Franks looting instead of rescuing. The people's patience dissolving like stale bread in water. A younger Gothic lord slams a fist onto the table. "If we accept," he says, voice cracking slightly, "we admit our kingdom is dead." An older one answers, more tired than angry. "Look around you, it's already a ghost. This just decides whether we join it." That silences the room. You leave the hall later that day trailing behind your Gothic escort. They're unusually quiet. One finally murmurs, "If we surrender, we lose our kingdom. If we refuse, we lose our lives." The other adds, "And if we keep fighting, we lose both." Slowly. You pass a group of citizens outside the palace, faces thin, eyes alert. They don't know the details of the terms, but rumours travel faster than disease. "They say the Romans will spare us," a woman whispers. "They also said the Franks would save us," a man replies grimly. An old man shrugs. "At my age, I don't care who collects the taxes as long as the bread comes back." You suspect that opinion is more common than anyone in the palace wants to admit. Back in the Byzantine camp, you hear the other side of the same anxiety. "Can we trust them if they surrender?" a marine asks. "Or will they stab us in the back the moment we turn?" A veteran shrugs. "We'll garrison the city. Watch them. Distrust is cheaper than another 5 years of war." In one tent, you overhear Belisarius himself speaking with his close officers. His voice is calm, but his words cut through the smoky air. "We have broken their strength," he says, "but not their pride. Pride starves, but it also fights. These terms give their pride a quieter place to die." An officer frowns. "And if they refuse?" Belisarius looks toward Ravenna's silhouette in the distance. "Then we wait. Hunger has never lost a siege." You swallow, feeling equal parts awe and unease. This is the part of war no one celebrates in poems, the part where you win by letting the other side choose between surrender and oblivion. In Ravenna, the debates go on for days. Some nobles demand one last sortie. "We'll break the blockade," they insist. "Storm the ships, cut a way out through the marsh." Everyone knows it's suicidal. Everyone remembers how few horses are left. Everyone's too hungry to even swing a sword properly. Others cling to the fantasy of the Franks. "They will come," they repeat, as though saying it enough will make it true. A clerk quietly reminds them that the last report from the north was smoke rising over plundered Gothic estates. Finally, a voice you haven't heard much speaks, a mid-ranking Gothic officer, armour-dented, face worn. "My men respect me," he says. "They are loyal. But if we refuse these terms, I cannot promise they'll keep fighting, not with their children fainting in the streets." The hall goes painfully still, because that right there is the real breaking point. Not walls, not towers, not moats. Loyalty. You stand by a canal that evening, watching the water slide past in slow, murky currents. As a Ravenna citizen, an old woman with a scarf pulled tight around her head sits nearby feeding ducks with scraps of stale crust. She glances at your cloak, at your foreign armour, and says, "When I was young, we heard stories that Rome fell, but we were told Ravenna still stood, that our city outlasted the old empire." She tosses another bit of bread into the water. "Now I see soldiers from the east on our streets," she continues. "Do you know what that feels like?" You answer carefully. "Like waking up to find the story you were living in is over." She nods slowly. "Yes, over." She pauses. "But if surrender means my grandchildren live, then let the story end." That, more than any envoys, feels like the real acceptance. Back outside, in the damp hush of the siege camps, you hear that Belisarius has sent one more message into the city. Clearer, firmer, final. Lay down your arms, open your gates. Your king and nobles will live. Your people will eat again. Refuse, and we will not storm your walls. We will simply wait until even the thought of refusal seems ridiculous. You look across the darkened marsh at Ravenna's faint lights and understand. The terms are not just paper. They're a mirror. In it, Ravenna sees itself. Starving. Isolated. Exhausted. And soon, very soon, it will have to decide whether pride is really worth dying for. Morning settles over Ravenna like a thin grey blanket. Quiet. Cold. Tired. The city doesn't wake so much as it drags itself into another day. You feel it immediately. The heaviness in the streets, the hollow looks, the slow steps. Hunger is everywhere now, tucked into sleeves, stitched into faces, hiding under every whispered prayer. Even the gulls circling the canals seem thinner. You walk through the market square with your escort, boots echoing on worn stones. Stalls that once overflowed with fish and bread now display a few wilted vegetables, a handful of grains, maybe a sad-looking onion or two. A baker sweeps the steps of his shop, though there's nothing to sell. Old habit, you suppose. A mother hushes her crying son and hands him the tiniest piece of dry bread. He eats it like it's a feast. Everyone in the city is waiting for something. They just don't know what. Up in the palace hall, the waiting is sharper. You take your place near a column as the Gothic nobles file in. Pale, thin, irritated, and exhausted. Armour hangs loosely on frames that have lost too much weight. Voices rasp instead of boom. Even the scrape of chairs sounds sluggish. Then Wittigs enters. He's changed the most. His cloak droops. His eyes look bruised. His crown sits crooked, like a burden he forgot to straighten. He takes his seat with the slow care of a man carrying both a kingdom and a migraine. On the long table before him lies the rolled parchment with Belisarius's terms. No one touches it. No one needs to. Everyone here can recite every line. Lay down arms. Open the gates. Nobles spared. People fed. Wittiges treated with honour. The Gothic kingdom ended without drama. For days they've argued over these words. But hunger is louder than any politician. A senior noble stands first. The stores are almost gone, he rasps. The people murmur. Soldiers whisper of desertion. We cannot hold another month. A younger commander slams his fist down. We are Goths. We do not kneel. His outburst hangs in the air and dies. No one supports him. Not anymore. A grizzled officer speaks instead, voice rough but steady. My men will fight till death, they always have. But their families... He pauses, jaw tightening. Their families cannot, the younger commander sneers. So we hand ourselves to the Romans like lambs? No, the officer says softly. We walk with dignity while we still can. You feel it, the room shifting. Pride is still here, yes, but pride is starving. Wittiges lifts a hand. Silence falls. You all know the truth, he says. Our fields burn, our allies plunder us, our roads are lost, our sea is closed. We hold Ravenna, yes, but Ravenna holds nothing for us except hunger. A noble's voice cracks. If we surrender, our kingdom dies. Wittiges meets his gaze. Our kingdom has been dying for years. I refuse to let our people die with it. No one argues. The imperial envoys step forward. They read the terms again, though everyone knows them by heart. The hall listens in heavy stillness. His Imperial Majesty guarantees the safety of King Wittiges and the Gothic nobles, the feeding of the people, and the honourable settlement of all who lay down arms. But the envoys barely finish when a weary clerk, thin as parchment and twice as fragile, speaks from the back. Our children will live, he says simply. That's it. No speech, no flourish, just truth. And somehow it cuts sharper than any sword in the room. The tension loosens. Chairs shift. Shoulders sag. The last spark of defiance flickers and dims. One noble mutters, "Better a living vassal than a glorious corpse." Another replies, "At least a vassal can eat." Someone at the far end murmurs, "I'm too tired to be heroic." You can feel it. The moment before a decision, the hush before a kingdom exhales its final breath. Witiges rises slowly. If we keep fighting, he says, our names may be remembered as stubborn warriors, but no one will remember the innocent lives lost because we refuse to see the truth. He straightens. Not like a king preparing for battle, like a man setting down a burden he has carried far too long. I accept the terms. The words drift through the hall like falling ash. Some nobles flinch, others bow their heads. One lets out a choked sob disguised as a cough. The envoys bow deeply, not triumphant but solemn. Even they understand the weight of witnessing a kingdom surrender to exhaustion rather than steel. Witiges adds, for the sake of our people, we submit. No cheers, no ceremony, just the sound of men breathing again, finally, as if starvation had been holding their lungs closed. Outside, the city learns quickly. A soldier slams his fist against a wall, then slides down and laughs bitterly. Another sits on a step staring into the canal. A third whispers, "Will there be bread?" "Yes," someone answers. He nods. Then that's enough for now. Ravenna's mosaics still glitter above, untouchable, but beneath them the Gothic kingdom quietly ends. Not with fire, not with a siege tower, but with a simple fact. Hunger wins what armies cannot. Witiges has yielded. The nobles have yielded. The city has begun to breathe again. And somewhere in the marsh outside, Belisarius prepares to walk through the gates of a kingdom that has already surrendered in its heart. The next morning dawns strangely bright, as if the sky itself hasn't realized a kingdom just agreed to die. A soft mist hangs over the marsh, glowing gold in the early light. From the Byzantine side of the lines, everything feels expectant. Quiet, but not tense. Quiet the way a room feels just before someone opens a long-locked door. Belisarius stands near the water's edge, arms folded, watching Ravenna's walls through the thinning fog. His cloak flutters in the sea breeze. Officers cluster behind him, waiting for orders, but he says nothing for a long time. Finally he murmurs, "They've made their choice. Now we show them we keep ours." A messenger arrives, breathless, mud to the knees, hair plastered to his forehead. He drops to one knee. "My lord." Ravenna is ready. They request formal terms be presented inside the walls. Belisarius nods once. Prepare the delegation. No armour, no drawn weapons. We go as men, not conquerors. You feel a flicker of nerves. This part, walking into a city that has been your enemy for years, trusting they won't panic or lash out. This part is always the most delicate one, officer whispers. Do we trust them? Belisarius answers without turning. We trust their hunger. You swallow. Fair. By midday, you're part of the small delegation rowing across the calm lagoon. The oars dip silently. The water glimmers. Ravenna looms larger with every pull, its walls still proud, its towers still tall, its mosaics shining faintly even from afar. A city surrendering doesn't stop being beautiful. As you approach the main harbour gate, you see Gothic soldiers lined along the battlements, bows lowered, spears resting, eyes hollow. They stare at you the way people stare at winter, tired, resigned, ready for it to end. The gate opens slowly, groaning like a long stiff joint. You pass under the arch. Inside, Ravenna is a sculpture of exhaustion. People gather along the canals watching you pass. Thin, quiet, wide-eyed. Some look fearful, some curious, some simply too worn out to care who walks under their roofs now. A few nod. A few cross themselves. One old man mumbles, "About time." You make your way toward the palace. The air is heavy with incense and stale smoke. Dogs bark listlessly. Somewhere, a pot boils with watery broth. The city smells like hunger and old hopes. When you reach the palace gates, the Gothic royal guard is waiting, spears planted in the ground. Their armour is polished, their cloaks straight, but they look like men who haven't slept in weeks. Their captain steps forward and says with formal dignity that cracks only slightly at the edges, "We welcome the emissaries of General Belisarius." You bow, he bows. Everyone bows just enough to preserve the last scraps of pride. Then you're led inside. The palace hall looks different now. You were here days ago, but hunger has not been kind even in that short time. The torches are fewer. The nobles stand closer together, as if proximity might keep the cold out. Witiges sits on his throne, crown adjusted properly today, posture straighter, but you can tell he barely slept. He rises as Belisarius enters. For a heartbeat, the room holds its breath. 2 worlds, 2 histories, 2 exhausted men meeting at the hinge of an era. Witiges speaks first. "We have accepted your terms." His voice doesn't tremble, but something behind it does. Belisarius inclines his head. "And I have come to honour them." There is no mockery in his tone, no triumph, only respect. Heavy, quiet, real. The 2 men step closer. Witiges looks smaller up close, worn down by a year of siege and decades of responsibility. Belisarius looks calm, composed, almost gentle. You realise why soldiers follow him, because he never takes more than he must. Witiges extends a sword, his royal blade, beautifully forged, inlaid with garnet. "I surrender Ravenna," he says, "and with it the rule of my people." Belisarius accepts it with both hands. "I take it," he replies softly, "so that Italy may have peace." No cheer follows, no applause, just a long, solemn exhale from everyone in the hall, like a city finally letting go of a breath it's been holding since the war began. What happens next feels surreal. A scribe steps forward to read the final agreement. No one interrupts, no one argues. It's as if everyone's too weary to resist anything except the promise of food and survival. Witiges and his nobles shall retain honour and dignity under imperial custody. Ravenna citizens shall be protected by imperial law. Food and aid shall be provided immediately to the starving. Those wishing to serve under the emperor may do so. With each line, you watch shoulders relax, eyes soften, jaws unclench. Ravenna is not being looted. Ravenna is not being punished. Ravenna is not being burned. Ravenna is being absorbed. Outside, faint cheers rise, not triumphant, but relieved. Someone has spread word that the gates will open soon to the Byzantine grain barges. A woman cries openly in the doorway. A boy whispers, "Bread?" And his mother answers, "Yes, real bread." You feel something warm bloom in your chest. Victory doesn't always feel like glory. Sometimes it feels like permission to hope again. Belisarius doesn't linger in pomp. He gestures to the officers behind him. "Bring the first wagons. Begin distribution at once. The people eat before any soldier touches a grain." The Gothic nobles react with quiet surprise. This is not the conqueror they expected. You leave the palace with your escort and step into the street just as the first Byzantine carts rumble through the gate. Piled high with sacks of flour, jars of oil, salted fish, lentils, barley. People line up, trembling with relief. Some fall to their knees. Others kiss the sacks as if greeting returning family. A child receives a piece of warm flatbread and giggles uncontrollably. His father starts to cry. Inside the walls you hear the palace bells ring. Not an alarm, not a summons. A signal. A release. A surrender to life instead of war. You glance up, and for the first time, Ravenna does not look like a dying kingdom. It looks like a city waking from a long nightmare. Later, as the sun dips over the marsh, you find a moment of stillness atop a small stone bridge. Ravenna's canals mirror the sky in streaks of pink and gold. Distantly, you see Belisarius speaking with Witiges again. Quietly, privately, respectfully. You think of all the battles fought, all the men lost, all the years spent ravaging Italy. And now, no final massacre, no dramatic storming of the gates, just 2 exhausted armies choosing tomorrow over glory. The war for Ravenna is over, and peace, real, fragile, precious peace, has taken its first breath. You don't march into Ravenna as a conqueror. You flow in, quietly, steadily, like water filling a basin. The gates stand open, guarded now by a strange mix of Gothic sentries and Byzantine officers. The tension isn't gone, but it's muted, tired, almost embarrassed to still be present. As you pass beneath the arch and step fully into the city as part of Belisarius's occupying force, the first thing you feel is not triumph, but relief, the kind that seeps into your bones. Ravenna doesn't resist. It exhales. The streets are lined with citizens watching the soldiers enter no thrown stones. No curses, just thin faces and wide, searching eyes. Children clutch their mothers' robes. Old men stand with hands clasped. A few women whisper prayers of thanks to God, to fate, to anyone who finally brought food and an end to fear. Behind you, grain carts rumble steadily into the city. Ahead of you, Belisarius rides with the calm dignity of someone who understands that victory isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet because everyone's too tired to make noise. A marine beside you mutters, "Feels like walking into a sick room, not a city." You nod, because it's true. Ravenna is breathing again, weakly, cautiously, but breathing. The first task of occupation isn't claiming buildings or raising flags, it's feeding people. At the main square near the canals, long tables are set up. Imperial quartermasters distribute bread, barley, lentils, and oil. You help direct lines, making sure no one pushes ahead, though honestly, no one has the energy to. A old man takes his ration and whispers, "Bless you," and you feel yourself swallow hard. Even Gothic soldiers receive rations without discrimination. Some of them eat so fast they choke. Others take their portion and immediately run home to share it with family. A Gothic officer, still in full armour, steps forward and bows slightly. He looks uncomfortable, showing gratitude, but hunger has stripped everyone of pride. "My men thank you," he says stiffly. "We expected harsher treatment." A Byzantine quartermaster shrugs. "You're citizens now, hungry ones." The officer starts to reply, then stops, because that simple truth is bigger than any insult. Next, you follow your unit to the palace district to secure government buildings. The mosaics still gleam on the walls, depicting emperors long dead, their gold tesserae flickering in torchlight. It's surreal to walk through such opulence knowing the people outside nearly starved under those very ceilings. Wittige's throne room has already been turned into a temporary administrative hub. Clerks unfurl scrolls, translators sit at tables, officers ink reports. A few Gothic scribes are already helping, their faces a mixture of relief and loss. You glimpse Wittiges himself being escorted, not as a prisoner, but as an honoured captive preparing for transport to Constantinople. He looks strangely peaceful. As he passes, he pauses to speak with Belisarius. "You have shown mercy," he says. Belisarius bows his head slightly. "You have shown wisdom." Witiges exhales. "May my people understand that." You watch them, and for a moment it feels like witnessing the passing of a torch. One leader ending a story, another beginning the next. Then comes the task of securing the armories. You and a squad move through the city's barracks and weapons depots. The Goths cooperate without resistance, some hand over swords with trembling hands, as if releasing ghosts. Others do it with relief, tired of fighting, tired of fear, tired of everything. A young Gothic soldier lays his spear down and whispers, "I'm done." Your sergeant nods. "Good. Live long enough to change the world in quieter ways." He smiles weakly. "I might try that." By afternoon, the majority of weapons have been catalogued and stored, not confiscated forever, just secured. Belisarius doesn't need Ravenna disarmed to rule it. He needs it stable. Food distribution continues for days. With food comes sound. You begin hearing laughter, thin, tentative, but real. Children start running again instead of dragging their feet. Fishermen return to the canals, merchants reopen shutters. A woman hangs laundry from a window and hums a hymn. Ravenna is waking. But beneath the awakening lies something heavier. What now? The people wonder. The soldiers wonder. The nobles wonder. You walk through the forum with a group of mixed Gothic and Byzantine soldiers who have been assigned joint patrol duties, odd pairing, but necessary. No one trusts the quiet yet. A Gothic veteran asks, "Will Justinian tax us cruelly?" A Byzantine marine responds honestly, "Probably, but he'll also rebuild your roads." The veteran snorts. I suppose that's fair. One evening, you stand on the roof of a watchtower overlooking the lagoon. Torches shimmer on the water. Boats drift lazily. The marsh wind carries the sounds of life. Pots clanging, children giggling, dogs barking again because they finally smell food. Belisarius climbs the steps behind you and stops beside you. You've seen the worst of this war, he says quietly. You nod. He gestures at the city, now see its result. Ravenna glows below, dim but alive, like embers stirred back to flame. This city is a jewel of the empire, he murmurs, not because of its mosaics, but because its people endured. Now we help them rise. You watch him, admiring something you can't quite name. He's not here for glory, not for loot, not even for Justinian's favour. He's here because he believes what he just said. And somehow, that belief feels more powerful than any siege engine. As days pass, the transformation accelerates, fishermen bring larger catches. Merchants reopen their shops, cautiously optimistic. Gothic families emerge from shuttered homes with timid smiles. Byzantine engineers inspect bridges and aqueducts, preparing plans for repairs. In one square, you see children chasing each other around a statue, laughing loudly enough to echo between the walls. It's the first time laughter in Ravenna hasn't sounded like desperation. A Gothic noblewoman distributing bowls of soup catches your eye and says, "It seems peace tastes better than pride." You laugh softly. "Always has." She nods. "We simply forgot." That night, as you return to camp, you look back at Ravenna glowing gently behind you. Its walls are no longer symbols of defiance. They're symbols of survival. A city that refused to burn. A people who refused to disappear. A conquest that became something softer, stranger, better. Ravenna has fallen, but Ravenna also endures. And you realize that this occupation, this quiet rebuilding, is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new Italy. One built not from fire, but from hunger, mercy, and finally, hope. Ravenna feels different now. Not triumphant, not conquered, but exhaled. The tightness that once clung to every street, every canal, every whispered conversation has loosened. Food flows again. Fear has thinned. Even the gulls seem louder, bolder, swooping over the docks like they own the place. But for you, for Belisarius, for the Byzantine officers who have lived through years of mud and marsh and misery, there's still one last chapter, the departure, the handing over. The slow, careful release of a city no longer resisting, and not yet fully yours. This is the part of war no one sings about, the part where you don't fight, you guide. You begin your morning in the forum, watching merchants restock their stalls. There's bread again, real loaves. Not the thin, desperate stuff Ravenna survived on during the siege, but full, warm, fragrant bread that fills the air with the scent of wheat and calm. A boy carries 3 loaves stacked proudly in both arms. You hear someone laugh. Loud. Carefree. It sounds strange after so many months of quiet misery. A Gothic mother approaches one of your comrades and presses a small cloth-wrapped bundle into his hands. "For the soldiers," she says. "For not killing us." Inside is a handful of almonds, that's all she has, but she gives them anyway. Your comrade swallows hard and salutes her. She bows. It feels like watching the city stitch itself back together one gesture at a time. At the palace, preparations begin for the final transition. Imperial banners, purple, gold, precise, are unfurled from windows and balconies. They hang beside Gothic drapes still bearing eagles and knotwork. The two symbols together look oddly peaceful, as if acknowledging a shared truth. Empires rise, kingdoms fall, but people persist. Witiges stands inside the hall where he surrendered only days ago. Today he wears simpler clothes, no crown, no jewels, just a dark cloak clasped at the neck. Without the trappings of kingship he looks human, sad, perhaps relieved. Belisarius approaches him with quiet dignity. "The ship is ready," he says. "When you choose to depart, you will be escorted with honour." Witiges nods. I never imagined my last voyage as king would be to Constantinople. Belisarius answers softly, Many kings have gone there in chains, you go in peace. Witiges takes a breath. Peace. The word sounds unfamiliar in his mouth, like a foreign coin he's unsure is real. He looks toward a window overlooking the canals and adds, Tell the emperor this. I fought for my people, I failed for my people, but I surrender for them too. Belisarius bows his head. I will. And for a moment the two men, Roman and Goth, victor and vanquished, share a quiet understanding that only those who've carried worlds on their shoulders can understand. The next days blur into one long, careful unwinding. Byzantine engineers survey bridges, fortifications, aqueducts. Clerks count grain stores and prepare new ledgers. Gothic nobles swear loyalty, or at least neutrality, to the empire. Troops are reassigned, some to guard duty, some to patrols, some preparing to march south. You find yourself helping at the ration lines again, partly because the people trust your face now. A girl shyly offers you a dried fig. The first fresh sweetness she's tasted since the siege began. You accept it gently, feeling the weight of her gratitude far more than the fig itself. A group of craftsmen approaches, asking when repairs to the old docks might begin. A priest asks when imperial judges will take over the courts. A fisherman asks if the tax farmers from the east are really as terrifying as rumours say. You try not to laugh when a Byzantine marine behind you mutters, Tell him yes, fear builds character. But beneath the chatter lies a deeper truth. Ravenna is no longer bracing for death, it is planning for tomorrow. On the third morning, the moment truly sinks in. The war is over. You see it not in ceremony, not in banners, but in a simple scene by the water. Two children, one Gothic, one the son of a Byzantine officer, play together by the canal, tossing pebbles into the water to make ripples. No fear, no hesitation, just curiosity and giggles. Their mothers watch from a few steps back, standing close enough to talk, far enough to pretend they aren't talking. Slowly they inch closer until they're speaking softly about bread prices, illnesses, laundry soap, ordinary things, the things that war steals first and peace restores last. You realise with a quiet ache that this is the real victory, not the surrender scroll, not the opened gates, not the captured king, but this, two women talking about children while sunlight dances on the canal. That night, the entire city seems to glow. Torches flicker along the bridges. The mosaics inside San Vitale gleam like they've been polished by the return of hope alone. The air smells of roasting fish and warm bread and something else, calm. You stand atop the palace balcony as Belisarius steps beside you, gazing out over the quiet city. You've done well, he says. You blink. Me? He smiles faintly. All of you. Ravenna breathes because of many small mercies. That is harder to achieve than any victory in battle. You look out at the curve of the lagoon, the soft glow in windows, the shifting reflections on the water. Is it over, you ask? Belisarius rests his hands on the railing. This war. He nods slowly. Yes, but peace. Peace is a siege of its own, one we must win every day. Down in the city, a bell rings softly, slow, steady, like a heartbeat that has finally returned to rhythm. The last Gothic kingdom in Italy has fallen, but you don't feel like you're standing over a corpse. You feel like you're watching a city wake up. And somewhere deep in the marsh, the wind whispers through the reeds as if carrying away the final echoes of battle. You close your eyes for a moment and let the night settle around you. The torches flicker softly, their glow drifting across the canals in long, gentle strokes. The sounds of the city have changed. No shouting, no frantic footsteps, just murmured conversations, the splash of an oar, the distant clink of pottery being stacked for morning markets. Everything moves slower now, calmer, as if Ravenna finally remembers how to rest. The breeze carries the scent of warm bread and cool water, and you breathe it in slowly, letting your shoulders loosen, letting the tension of months seep out of your bones. You feel the city beneath you, tired, yes, bruised, yes, but no longer afraid. The wall's shadow has lifted, replaced by something softer, something fragile but real, the kind of quiet that invites deep breaths and slow thoughts. You listen to the gentle rippling of the lagoon, the lull of water brushing against the old stone banks. It's steady, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. You imagine the people of Ravenna sleeping tonight with full stomachs, wrapped in blankets, hearing the same calming sound. For the first time in a long time, they sleep without hunger, without fear. The stars blink softly overhead, scattered like tiny golden tesserae across a dark mosaic sky. They shimmer, fade, return. Quiet companions for a city finally drifting into peace. You let your thoughts drift with them, lighter now, floating further and further from memories of siege and sorrow. And as the night deepens, the world grows still, soft, safe, warm. You breathe out and let the day go. Good night, traveller, rest easy. Peace has finally come to Ravenna. Good night, sweet dreams.